Okay, hello everyone. Happy Sunday. Can you hear me okay? Hope so. Happy Mother's Day to any mothers who are there, might be listening. I'm just making sure I've got everyone in here from the waiting room and then we'll get started. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about summertime and summer practice. I know if you're, listening, you might be in school or you might have a student that's in school or, even in your job, you might have some, summertime off or summer might be a little different for you. I think in general with summertime, we always remember back to our childhood days, right? Like when we were in, grade school and everyone was so anticipating the summertime. It was like that's all you could think about was school getting out in the summer and all the fun stuff you'd be able to do in the summer and things like that. As you grow older, you look forward to this summer probably for different reasons, maybe nicer weather, maybe time off, maybe a lot of things. But I think it's an important time to reflect, rejuvenate, reevaluate, those kind of things. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Now, as always, please feel free to put questions in the chat and I'll keep track of that and we'll get to them at the end. So one thing that summer is really great for is just basically taking a rest, right? So resting might look like very different things for different people. Some people might physically just need to take more rest. That could be, taking more time for sleep, for self-care, for those kinds of just basic things that we need to do to keep ourselves alive and thriving as human beings. Sometimes it seems like we don't have any time to do that, but it's really necessary. And even if we're really strong people and high energy, eventually the tanks can, run out. So it's really important that we are taking time to rest. Now, for some people, rest might also be something more active, resting might be getting involved in something a little different or just changing things a little bit. So resting can mean different things to different people, but it's important that we, at some point in time, and it might be at a different point in time in the year for you, summer might not be possible, but taking a good rest is important. Now, this also means taking a rest at times from the flute. Consistent practice is a good thing, and we definitely want to do that. But at a certain point in time, everyone needs a little break from something. Now, you might say, okay, I'll take a rest and I'll play a little bit here and there. Sometimes if we don't take a real good rest and get it out of our system, we can kind of get into that like sort of kind of mode where we're playing a little bit each day. It's not very productive or very purposeful. And we're not really like taking the rest that we need, but we're also like not really practicing. And that can kind of go on for a prolonged period of time. And so sometimes it's good just to put the flute completely away for a while. It might be resting. Maybe you're not going to take a complete rest from the instrument, but maybe you can take a rest from like how much repertoire you've been practicing, or maybe you can take a little rest from how much time you're spending on your fundamentals. Again, this is going to look a little bit different for everybody in terms of what your needs are, but it's really important to pay attention to your own needs and what you're needing. Now, I can say for my own personal experience, I usually take a little break and rest from the flute in the summers, but I'm just coming out of my academic semester where I've been like teaching everyone how to play the flute and talking about flute and listening to flute like all day long, but I have very little time to spend on the flute myself with my own practice. So for me, rest in a way is like resting a little bit from the teaching and actually getting a little bit more time to spend with the flute myself. So again, everyone's rest is going to look a little different per their needs. And it's really important, as I said, to pay attention to what you feel like you're needing, and you go ahead and take that rest. If you do decide to take a break from the instrument, I think what's so important is that while you're on this break, is that you really enjoy your life and don't feel guilty about taking a break. I think sometimes when we do take a break, we start feeling guilty, and then we get stressed, like, oh, I'm not practicing. Uh-oh, I'm gonna not sound very good. Eventually, when you go back to the instrument, you go back to it with that kind of anxious, like sort of stress feeling. And maybe you start even doing physically things that like are weird because you were so stressed about the fact that you didn't practice, right? So therefore, then taking the rest or the break is kind of pointless. So if you're gonna take a break, put it away. Don't even think about it. Don't even, I know when I take a break, I don't even think about it. So when I pick it up again, it's just like, it was like yesterday. It could have been a week or 2 weeks or a month, but it feels like it was yesterday because I wasn't thinking about it. And oftentimes your muscles, after some rest, they adjust back, right away. Especially like the first day feels really good. The second day is when you usually start overthinking stuff, and then it sounds bad again. but sometimes just not feeling guilty, and just the allowing yourself to just let it go and to enjoy other things in your life, which is super important. After all, our instruments are vehicles for expression of music. Music is a reflection of life. So if you want to feed your instrument life, you have to feed life to yourself. So it's really important that as you take time off, that you're really having a good time in whatever you're doing. My great teacher, Jeannie Baxtresser, she said something recently. She was speaking to my students, and she said, time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time. So I thought that was a great expression, right? So, I mean, you can take that a few different ways, but, we need that sometimes. We need to allow ourselves to be unproductive, as one might call it, because actually you could be being very productive if it's giving you what you need in the moment. Other things, we want to make sure that we do, I think, it's just make sure we disconnect sometimes a little bit, maybe from all of this hustle and bustle of what's going on. I think these days, what makes us tired is not only just what we are doing in our jobs or our school or our practice, it's that we have so much access to information, whether that be politics or, world crises or things like that. And we're inundated constantly with information, social media, what our friends doing, what our mom's doing, what our aunt's doing, what so-and-so's aunt's doing, what celebrities are doing, what celebrities' moms are doing, what celebrities' pets are doing, what random panda bears are doing. It's like nonstop information. And while it can be a nice, fun diversion and distraction, it's nice to connect with people and all the benefits of that, it can just get to be a little too much. It's like system overload, right? And so sometimes that stuff can make us tired too. And then we don't even know what we're tired from. We're just so tired. So sometimes it's good to disconnect a little bit from that if you can. Maybe turn off the phone for an hour, go take a walk in nature, actually breathe fresh air, look at the sunshine, maybe take a walk in the rain even, just like these normal human things that we can experience to remind us that we're alive on this planet just like everybody else, interacting with people, real people, not social media people, or like through a screen like we're doing right now, which is great because we can connect. But, it's good to get out there and interact with real people and recharge in this way as well. I think that's really important. And I think it's all part of the resting process, because we are taking a rest from all of that, again, inundation of information and experience that we get on a daily basis. Another thing, I think summer is an important time for reflection and re-evaluation. Now, I often say that when we practice in general, we often react and we reject. So when we play something we don't like, we react to it like that, and then we just stop playing, right? So in general, what's the best thing to do is to reflect and reevaluate what we're doing rather than just react and reject. So on a more philosophical sense, in your summertime, some things that you can maybe, think about to reflect. Perhaps you want to look back on the year and think about all of the things that you have accomplished. Now, accomplished doesn't mean accomplishments, meaning I won this, I got this, accomplished could just means like things that happened, things that you got done, Oh, I completed this book of etudes. Did I think I was going to? Oh, I thought I'd only complete half. Whoa, or I thought I'd complete 3 etude books and I only did 1. So just kind of reflecting on what happened throughout the year. What did you accomplish? Did that align with your goals of what you wanted to accomplish? Did you even have any goals? Did you have any expectations? Maybe you didn't. Did it surpass those expectations? So you can just think about, what you kind of were expecting out of your time throughout the year. And then, was it, what you wanted to achieve, or, did something different happen, and sort of reflect on why that might be the case either way. Another thing you might want to ask yourself is, am I where I want to be? Now, most of the time we are where we're supposed to be. We just don't always know it. But, sometimes there are things that we can ask ourselves, okay, I really wanted to accomplish this, and this, but I didn't seem to achieve that. So why is that? Is what I'm doing working for me? That's another important thing to ask yourself. Sometimes we can get so much in a routine that we don't notice that things that we maybe previously had to do to be successful or previously had to practice, they might be different now. A very, very simple example of like technically playing the flute is, I find that throughout the stage of a person's flute playing career, you'll probably make several adjustments in terms of where the alignment of your head joint might be, right? And that might be, at some point, you might be tending to like turn in a lot, right? Because of like some maybe balance issues in the hand. So then maybe someone suggests, or you decide to try, and like you roll your head joint out to try to, turn it out forward to try to counterbalance that, right? So you might do that, and then your sound might change, and then your way of connecting to the instrument might change. Your embouchure might change. The way you're balancing in your hands might change. A lot of other elements might change. So that might then therefore cause you to have to make an adjustment to your head joint again. Maybe you have to roll in a little bit, something like that. So that's just a very simple example that I think most flute players go through, at one point or another. And we have to reevaluate, okay, this is for example, your setup, as you might want to call it, how you align your flute, how you balance your flute. Okay, is my setup working for me? Is this, why did I decide to align it this way? Is it because somebody told me to do it that way? Is it because, it's my experience of that's what's worked? Try to think about why you did it in the first place, and then is it still working for you? And if not, you have to think about, okay, what has changed? And then what adjustment might I need to make to go along with those changes? That's just a kind of simple example. Another question you might ask yourself is there something holding me back from where I want to be? That could be another person. Oftentimes it's ourselves holding us back from different things. Sometimes we're just afraid or scared of, you know, I always say like with ability comes responsibility. So I think sometimes we're afraid of almost like becoming too good, because then we have to like have all that responsibility of being good, or like having people's expectations being more of us because we, you know, get to a certain place. So you know, maybe you don't want to be in a certain place, that's okay. But if you're wanting to be somewhere and you feel like you're not getting there, you have to ask yourself, is there something or someone holding me back? Someone could be someone else. Someone could be yourself, right? Could be something, could be an instrument, right? You know, I know as a teacher, I really try to work with whatever flute a student has, right? And I don't think like everyone should, you know, buy a new flute and everyone has to have a certain flute, or if you have a gold flute, it's better, or what, anything like that. But there does come a certain point in time where, you know, just as if you were a carpenter and you were trying to build, you know, houses, and you had a very simple tool, you might not have the best results that if you had a better tool, you know? So sometimes we have to evaluate our equipment if possible. Like, is there anything that I can do to improve on my equipment? On the other side, we don't want to be crazy about that. Like, you know, every 3 weeks we think we need a new head joint or a new flute or something like that just to be better. No, but there are times in our lives where we do need to evaluate, like, is this the best instrument for me? And you might just try other ones and you might come to the conclusion, oh, actually my instrument works really well for me. I haven't found anything better. But sometimes it's good to just check in with that and see if, you know, that's something that is working for you, or you might need to adjust at some point. Maybe things are going pretty well for you actually, but then you might ask yourself, well, am I on a plateau? Which means like nothing's really going downhill or uphill. We're just kind of coasting along, right? Coasting along is not necessarily bad. And, you know, sometimes we don't always need to be feeling like we're, you know, ascending to the heavens at every moment, right? Sometimes just chilling out for a while is okay. Just being satisfied with where you are, that's okay. We need that sometimes, just for some stability, security, that's fine. But you might notice, oh, I've been sitting on this plateau for a long time. Maybe I want to see if there are some things I can do to keep moving on or keep moving forward. There is something to say, of course, about like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? That old expression, right? So sometimes I feel like you might have a system or a way of playing that works really well for you, but maybe you feel because there's so many different things out there and ideas and things like that, that you're like, oh, I have to try this, I have to try that, that it can almost like cloud what you're doing well. So I think there's no harm in trying new things, but if something is working for you, you should be aware of that and know why it's working for you, and know that you can always rely on it. Maybe you want something a little different, or you want more options, that's fine too. But it's a good idea to keep track and know of what works for you and what you do well. Now, in your practicing, you might ask yourself, like, am I being efficient, or can I streamline some things, right? So usually if we're trying to get really good at the flute in our younger years, we're like practicing hours and hours a day of like fundamentals, all the Tefnel and Gobert and Moise and all of those wonderful books. And there might come a point in time where that's not sustainable. We don't even need to do that anymore, you know? Doesn't mean we don't need to practice, but you might be able to streamline some of those exercises. Okay, I don't need to do every single key every day, right? I might be able to like do like maybe one major, one minor week, and I'm still touching on all this stuff every day, but I'm not doing like a huge amount like I was doing before. So sometimes just like finding ways to streamline things, or maybe you did like the way you practice your tone exercises or your vibrato exercises. Maybe you can find a way to streamline that, where the tone and vibrato exercise become more one thing and not like separate things. Just so again, you're still touching on the skills, the information, but you're finding ways to be more efficient for Well, many reasons. Number one, probably time management and effectiveness of what you're doing. Maybe another thing you could reflect on, you know, at some point in time, usually during the year, we all have maybe some things we would call maybe not as successful as some other more successful endeavors that we go through. I don't like to call things failures because I don't really think anything is like a failure. I think it's just a learning experience or something, a situation that didn't go in a way that you might wanted it to go, but it doesn't mean like it wasn't useful. So I think calling something a failure kind of, again, it allows you to almost reject it too easily. So, but you might have had situations that didn't go as planned, or perhaps you got some negative criticism. Maybe could have been from a teacher, could have been a colleague, maybe you did a competition or an audition or something like that. And maybe you got some criticism that was, maybe you even felt was not fair or just or something like that. I know that if I get something like that, I usually get a little upset about it. I usually, my spicy Italian personality usually makes me get in a little bit of a, you know, I'll show you mood. But with that said, I try to always take time to reflect and ask myself, okay, even if I don't agree with this criticism, is there any part of it that I can accept responsibility for, and any part of it that I can see why they are seeing this? Maybe they just have a different perspective than I do. Do I need to have a better perspective? I still might agree with my own perspective, but can I be more capable of seeing a different perspective? Can I learn something from this? Can I do something to make it better? So I think that's another way to reflect and reevaluate. Again, even in those moments where it doesn't feel like it's just criticism, you know, to take the time and see if you can find truth in it and take it to heart in that way and turn it out to be something positive for you, you know. Positive or negative, it's again, it's all about perspective, right? So ultimately it's energy being transmitted to you, whether it's positive or negative. And ultimately it's up to us in terms of how we utilize that energy, you know. So again, I said, I usually would, if I get negative feedback, I definitely, you know, my fighting spirit says, no, I'll work 10 times harder and I'll show you, and I'll, you know, do what I want to do. But again, that's energy, and everyone has to process that energy in a different way. And it doesn't mean that you can't, if you do get a criticism or something, that you can't feel bad about it, because you're human beings and no one likes to hear, you know, negative stuff being told to them. But, you know, we have to think of it as that it's moving energy that we can utilize, and we can turn it around and make it a positive thing. So another way I think that we can re-evaluate is reconnect. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes as we go into summer time, especially if you're connected to academia, whether being a teacher or a student, you can feel a little tired or burnt out. Maybe that's the expression I hear sometimes. So what does burnt out really mean, or what, you know, what is it? I think that most of us, if we really look at it, when we feel burnt out, we're not necessarily burnt out from the thing that we really love to do, that we're doing. It's all of the other stuff that surrounds what we're doing that we love that can negatively impact what we love to do, right? So I know for teachers, students are experiencing a lot more difficulties these days, whether it be from the world's troubles, the pandemic, that kind of thing. That can cause teachers to be very tired and feel burnt out from teaching, or maybe it's all the administrative duties that a teacher might have to do in addition to teaching, or those kind of things. It doesn't mean they're actually burnt out from the teaching. It's just the actual interaction with the students and the sharing of knowledge and that passion and that love. It's just that all the other stuff that surrounds it sometimes can be tiresome, right? Also, as we progress on, times change, systems change, what's normal changes, right? Sometimes these changes can be like really uncomfortable and difficult to navigate, right? So it makes us feel uncertain, and that uncertainty can also feel like we're burnt out because we feel disconnected from what we're doing. So one thing I think is really important is to find a way to try to go back and connect with the thing that made us fall in love with music and playing the flute in the first place, right? That can be something as simple as going back and like finding, like maybe it was like, if you can remember the very first recording you ever heard of like the flute. Maybe you have that. Maybe for a lot of that was, a recording of James Galway or Jean-Pierre Rampal or something like that. But going back and listening in a way that you try to almost forget the person that you became or the ears that you've developed. And it's not saying that you won't think it's good anymore or something like that, but just go back and try to connect with that feeling that you had when you first like heard a flute, or maybe it wasn't a flute, maybe it was some other music, or it could be classical music, could be some other kind of music, maybe it was something, but try to go back and connect with that. Now, I know for me, daily life can be very hectic, so many things with students, so many responsibilities, so many things. What keeps me going is that when I sit down with a piece of music, I try so deeply to connect to everything I love about making music. To me, music is like time travel, right? We get to go to all of these different points in history. It's storytelling. It's traveling, around the world. It's so many amazing things that we get to do through music. So I try to not sit down and think, oh, I have to practice this for this concert, or I have to do this for this, rehearsal, or blah, blah, blah. I try to sit down and just me with the music, why I fell in love with it in the first place. And I think that's really important to do on a as much as possible on a daily basis, but especially when we have more time, like in the summertime, often sit down and maybe listen to maybe your favorite flutists, or your favorite musicians or cellists or pianists or singer. Maybe you can also be curious about new things. That's another way to reconnect, right? Because maybe the connections that we've made have grown a little stale or tiresome, right? And we might have to explore a little bit more, be a little bit more curious. So I think summer is a really great time for that as well. And that's where I would say we need to rejuvenate and refill the gas tank in that way, right? So the ways to rejuvenate, right? You kind of have to take yourself to the spa, like the flute spa. So it could be many, many different things. Again, I just mentioned being curious, maybe about some things that you don't have as much experience with. I think another reason we kind of get burnt out is we all tend to live in a bubble, right, of some sort, and sometimes our bubbles get a little crowded or congested, and it feels like there's too much going on, right? So a way to help that, to not feel overwhelmed or burnt out, is to expand your bubble, expand your horizons, open up this space. When you open up the space and allow more, not just more stuff in to crowd your small space, but open up your space to allow more freedom, then things tend to feel a little bit more easy. So maybe if you're, an American flutist and you don't know much about like flutists from Europe or South America, you might check out that. Oh, wow, I never thought of, Serbian flutists. Oh, wow, there's so many amazing Serbian flutists. Wow, I can learn about all these people. Or, if you're from, China and you think, well, I don't know much about South African flutists, I want to know about that. Just having a curiosity for new things, I think is really great. Again, it doesn't have to be just flutists, of course. I'm saying flutists because we're here in a flute chat, of course, but it can be many different things, and certainly beyond flute. That's very important. But if you're really wanting to be like involved with flute and thinking about flute, that's some things that you can do. Now, maybe you want to reconnect also with some of your favorite pieces during the summer that you haven't played with for a long time. Maybe you can also reflect and reevaluate on those pieces. Like maybe, we all learn, for example, like a Mozart concerto when we're young, or the Chaminade concertino or something like that. And then when we go to play those pieces when we're a little older, we have those associations, right, from when we're young, and it's hard to disconnect from that. So again, that's a time to kind of reevaluate your approach, right? Because you have different tools after a certain point in time, different skill level, different tools for expression, so many different ways that you can, reevaluate and rejuvenate a piece that you learned maybe when you're younger. So that's a good thing to do. Maybe you played the Poulenc flute sonata and you really love that, and then you think, wow, what else did Poulenc write? I'm not really familiar with his writing. And then you take that time in the summer to do an investigation on Poulenc, and you realize, oh my gosh, he wrote all these great wind pieces, and he wrote operas, and he wrote all this piano music. And then you get so much more informed and inspired about that composer, which gives you more fuel and inspiration to practice and want to do things. So that's another thing that you can do. Getting to know composers that you had no previous experience with, right? Like now we have so many resources. Like the internet is literally has like every bit of information on it you ever wanted to know. So it doesn't, even if you have like, I don't know what to look for, even if you start with like you Google flute, like something will come up, right? And that will give you another link. And then you click on that link and something will come up. So even if you feel like you don't know where to start at all, if you know like one word, you can start a Google search, and you can go down that path of finding out like what you want to find, right? But there's so many great resources these days, even, for example, again, from a lot of my experiences coming from academia, of course, because I'm a professor. But for example, one of my students did her doctoral thesis a few years ago on a catalog of female composers from 1988 till 2020, basically. And it's a huge catalog of works. Of course, it's not every single piece, because it's absolutely impossible to know and locate every single piece written by female composers in that time. But it's a really, really comprehensive and huge list. It's also organized by country and categories and stuff like that. So even doing a quick Google search on something like that will help you to come across a resource like that, which is online and free and available to you. You don't even have to leave your house. And then you can start looking down the list and say, oh, maybe I was interested in composers from New Zealand, or maybe I want to play a piece with flute and electronics, oh, and here's a whole list, category of those kind of pieces too. So, exploring new resources, being interested in new things, that's another great way to rejuvenate and refill the tank. Now, in your actual practicing, one thing that I think is just extremely important in the summers, especially if you're in school and you're no longer being assisted by a teacher every week, or maybe you're, out of school even in general, but you need to give yourself permission to have ownership of your own practice time. So what does that mean? I think also one reason why we get burnt out or we lose interest in something is because we're only practicing to meet the expectations of others. Now, I've talked about this before if you've been at my talks. So that could mean the expectation of the method book we're using. Oh, this is Teffanel and Gobert scales. That's how they want it with these articulations, blah, blah, blah. Or my teacher told me to do it this way, or the conductor told me to do it this way, right? So in your practice session, you got to really understand what you want to sound like, what you want to achieve, what you want the results of your practice to be. Is it just maybe you play for your own enjoyment and that's it, and that's completely fine. And if that's all, no problem. Maybe you're looking to contribute something to the world through what you're doing, Either way, it's okay, but you want to know, like, what result do I actually desire from my practice? And am I just doing this because someone else told me I should? I find that the most sustainable, effective, and successful approaches will be ones that really are sincere to yourself, and the motivation really comes from within. Yeah, we all need external motivation every once in a while. We need those things, those goals. But ultimately, we have to become our own best teachers. And if you are in school, summertime is a good time to start really taking that ownership. Or if you're out of school, professional or whatever, just in general, you want to be taking that ownership over your practice time. We all need guidance sometimes. That's even when we're professionals, we still sometimes need guidance, or times where we might reevaluate things in that way, or get inspiration from others, or maybe even have a coaching or talk with another professional, a friend, and exchange ideas. It's okay to have guidance, but again, ultimately we need to have that ownership. So this can be a time in the summer to both change up your routine and maybe push your boundaries a little bit, explore new things in that way. Maybe vice versa. Maybe in the year, you aren't able to follow routine because of your school, because of your work, because of whatever. So the summertime might actually be a time where you get more regimented. It's all going to depend on, what your situation is, but you got to, again, know that for yourself, and then how you might want to utilize that time. You can kind of send yourself to flute boot camp, so to speak, maybe, it's like, okay, during the year, I have all these other responsibilities. I got to play a lot. I got to practice. I got to spend time preparing for the stuff I needed to spend time preparing, or learning my music for rehearsals, but I didn't really feel like I got to spend time with myself, with the instrument, really connecting to it in a very personal way that really satisfies me, right? So you can, send yourself to a combination of the flute spa and the flute boot camp. Now, in terms of like what you're practicing, again, like we all pretty much agree, right, that, Teffanel and Gobert and Moyes books, they're great and they're useful. Ultimately, they're only a resource, like any other resource. And who says that that's the one that we absolutely need to be using, right? I mean, we are very thankful to Teffanel and Gobert and Moyes for organizing those books, but ultimately they didn't invent the scale. So, it's okay to use other methods. You're not like being a morally corrupt flutist if you decide you want to use a different kind of method. Maybe you've used those all your life and they've been fine, but maybe it's good to think about it in different ways. Maybe, you happen to never, even if we're still talking about traditional methods, maybe you never used Reichert or Macquart or Georges Beret or Jeffrey Gilbert, and maybe you want to like check in to see like, oh, how did they organize it? And again, ultimately, it's the same material. It's just organized in a different way. And sometimes just even thinking about it in a different way or processing it in a different way helps us to improve on something or just have a different perspective on it. One book that I happen to really like, that's maybe a more like modern resource because person is still living, is Wally Kujala's Vade-Mecum. So if you're not familiar with Wally Kujala, he was, the piccolo player in the Chicago Symphony for a very long time and a great pedagogue teaching at Northwestern University. And he has wonderful book, the Vade-Mecum. And what I find that book extremely comprehensive. It has all the great stuff that, Tefnel and Gobert has in there, and, seventh chord arpeggios and, all of that stuff that we need to be practicing. But I think that he presents it in a sometimes a more fun way, if you might. I hate using that word fun, but it's a more engaging way perhaps at times. He also has other things that maybe some other method books don't have, like pentatonic scales and octatonic scales and blues scales and Hungarian minor scales. So also that opens us up to some slightly different styles of music as well, not just a straight like kind of a classical style. So there's some fun scales and rhythms exercises and scales based on excerpts and all sorts of things in there. So I happen to find that to be a really great resource. I'm not going to say that it's better than Tefnel and Gobert or something. Again, I don't really think of it as something is like better or worse. It's just different, presented in a different way. And, so summer is a great time to kind of indulge yourself in something a little bit new, explore something a little bit new, give yourself that challenge of maybe rethinking your technical approach in through a different lens. Ask yourself again, reevaluate, am I just going through the motions all the time of playing these scales, or am I really engaging with them? Am I really thinking about? So sometimes having a different resource or different material can really help you with that. Maybe you want to even look outside the classical realm. Maybe there's some like jazz methods or some things like that that can help you maybe explore new things or fill in some gaps that you feel like you have, or just get yourself out of your own comfort zone. That's another really great thing to do when you have some extra time in the summer. Perhaps you might be planning a recital or several recitals or concerts later on in the year, and summer could be a good time to start reading new repertoire or get a little bit ahead on your preparation. I know for myself personally, once I try to I play a lot of recitals in general, but at my university, I try to play a recital a semester for my students, because I think that's really important, that they hear me playing and see my also process of preparation. And, no matter how busy I get, I'm still going to prepare a recital every semester, since they're preparing recitals themselves. So summertime for me might be a time where I'm thinking about, okay, what am I looking to program this year? Can I start getting it down now? Because I know once school starts, travel kicks up, students' recitals kick up, that I'm not going to have as much personal practice time. So again, depending on what your situation might be, summer might be a time where you start to think ahead about repertoire, maybe practice ahead. Maybe you have or maybe you play in an orchestra. Maybe oh, my orchestra season, oh gosh, well, I got the flute jackpot this year. It's a Carnival of the Animals and Firebird and Peter the Wolf and the Symphonic Metamorphosis and all these flute excerpts. So maybe you're gonna, sit down in the summer and really, make sure you have all that material down, so that when the time comes, you don't have to like stress about it as much. So once again, everyone's needs are going to be different. Everyone's experiences are going to be different. But the summer can be a time where you're thinking about, how to plan ahead. I also suggest for students, like with competitions, oftentimes like they're like, yeah, I really want to do this competition and that competition. And oh, wow, I still have like 5 months. It's the application is due in February. And so in November, they're thinking like, oh, I've got so much time because it's in February. But in the US in November, we have a Thanksgiving break, and then we have like only 2 weeks left of the semester, and then there's a Christmas or holiday break and New Year's, and then the schools close and you can't record, and then, oh, we've got 1 week until February to actually get it done, right? So same thing with summer, like, in May, September seems very far away, but it's not so far. So making sure that you're, kind of surveying like how much time you have for things, planning ahead, knowing like, okay, this thing happens in October. It seems like a, part time, but I want to make sure I have the repertoire immediately. I want to make sure that I'm learned it by this time. I want to make sure that I've set up my recording schedule and everything by this time. So you're not, at the last minute going, oops, missed that opportunity, right? So just taking time to organize yourself for whatever it might be. Again, everyone, if you're in school, that's going to look different than if you're a professional or if you're a teacher or something like that. But just sitting down and taking the time necessary to kind of, again, that's part of your reevaluating and reflecting. It's like not only thinking about where you were and what you accomplished, but then taking time to look ahead, think about where you want to be in the next year. What are some of the goals you might have? How can you organize yourself? How can you organize your practice to get together with that? In general, I would say, try not to waste time on just being judgmentally critical about your decisions, whatever they were or whatever, they will be. Ultimately, whatever happens, it happens. And if you don't like what happened, again, feeling guilty or worrying about it or, being upset with yourself is not really going to get you to a better place where you want to be. So you can be critical in the sense of the analyzing or the reflecting on what you're doing, kind of evaluating yourself in that sense. But you don't want to waste too much time, again, with that kind of negative energy that we were talking about. So for me, once again, I think that those are some key words, key ideas to think about. Taking time to rest, taking time to reflect, reevaluate, and then making sure you rejuvenate yourself, refill the tank with inspiration to keep moving forward. So I think we have about 10 minutes left. So I want to make sure I leave some time for some questions. It can be questions about anything that I've talked about. It can be questions about things that I didn't talk about, you might want me to talk about, or anything else. I'm pretty open in terms of like what questions you ask. So feel free to either put it in the chat box, which sometimes is the easiest, or if you don't feel like writing it out, you can also unmute yourself and ask your question that way. If you're teachers and you have questions about students or anything like that, that's totally fine too. So again, any question is, yeah. So someone asked about intonation. I think one of the best ways to actually work on intonation, what I suggest to people is these days there's so many resources online, like Tom Play, or even on YouTube. There are several channels on YouTube where you can find backing tracks, and there's range of pieces. There's one channel in particular that has he puts a piece every single day, a backing track every day, a new one. And there are a lot of movie themes, or like what someone might call like cheesy music. And in a way, I think that's one of the best ways to work on intonation. And here's why. intonation, to be in tune means that something like feels right, right? Something is in the right place. And I think we often think about this in a kind of scientific way or an intellectual way when we are practicing, and we have to in many ways. But when you play those kind of pieces, they're not intellectual at all. They're based on pure emotional content. So when they're out of tune, they're just, there's nothing else to them, right? So like playing simple tunes that you probably are somewhat familiar with, like making it in tune is something more intuitive, you know, rather thinking that, okay, this is Mozart and I have to play it correct. And this is, you know, I find playing something simple, playing it with the backing track, because you have the harmony. And oftentimes, again, those kind of more simple songs have kind of simple harmonic progressions. But really, the only way to really play in tune is to understand the feeling of the harmony, because intonation is not a fixed thing. It really should be called intonating, because it's always moving depending on where the harmony is moving. So playing, of course, it's really good to play with a drone as well. You can find those on YouTube. I think a great one is, there's one for, it's like called for meditation and musical practice or something. And it kind of has this movement in it, do, which is basically a vibration, you know, and that's what you're trying to do when you play in tune, is being on the right wavelength, right? Even in conversation with someone, being in tune, that's what it means. And I find those drones are better than just a kind of like a dead drone, that, you know, that's a kind of like one constant tone, because there's no movement in it. And intonation is something that's constantly moving. So I think this question is maybe definitely could be a much longer answer for a longer topic, but just something simple that you can do other than the obvious ways of working with a tuner and that kind of thing, is I think just playing those simple songs, those simple tunes with backing track, and really listening for the harmonies and understanding that harmonies mean feelings. And to be in tune, we have to have the right feeling behind the notes, not just kind of put them in the right place technically. I think that's an important way to work on intonation. Okay. Yeah, recommendations for repertoire to perform for college auditions. Now, that's going to really depend on the school. Every teacher is quite different. Some schools will have a very specific list of pieces that they want to be performed, like down to the piece. Some schools leave it a little bit more open. A lot of schools, I think, are making nowadays more attempt to be more diverse and inclusive with their repertoire. And in fact, just asking for Mozart, Bach, and a French piece is not very diverse and inclusive. So they might leave it more open to what, you know, you can choose and what you can play. Me personally, as a teacher, there are some guidelines on the website, you know, but I really don't care, especially for the undergraduates. It's pretty open. It's basically like 2 pieces of your choice and maybe an etude or an excerpt, something like that. At that point in time, I'm not so much concerned with what you're playing. It's more like how you're playing and what skills you're bringing to the table and how you can develop those skills. But every school is really different. So I think it's important to do your research. But for example, if a school asks for like a contemporary piece, I wouldn't play Varese Density 21.5. That's not contemporary. If the composer is not alive, that's not contemporary, right? So I think, you know, if a school asks for a contemporary piece, you know, a living composer is great. Maybe also one from a more diverse background, like a female composer or Latin composer, something like that, you know. I think if you can come in and play well and also even maybe introduce the teacher to a new piece, that also says a lot about you as a student, that you're curious and open to new repertoire. Again, it might be a very, very traditional teacher that really wants to hear the Ibero Concerto and the Mozart and the Bach and the French, you know, that's it. So you kind of got to know that. That's why it's probably important to kind of feel that out or have a lesson if you can. But for me, you know, if I'm going to be more impressed if a student comes in with for a Baroque piece, they come in with Ana Bon di Venezia sonata or Leclerc sonata or Benda or something like this, rather than like Bach sonata that everybody knows. Or if they come in with for their romantic work, everyone probably plays Reinecke sonata. If they come in with the Melboni sonata or the Max Meyer Oberschleben, you know, if they have an expanded idea of repertoire, that already tells me something about a student. Again, that's me. Everybody might be different, so I would say, you know, try to feel it out in advance. What are my perspectives on teaching music about various composers for children with special needs? That's a great question. I don't have a lot of experience, you know, teaching students with special needs, so I feel like maybe I'm not as equipped to answer that question maybe as I could be. I would think in that case, you have to be very flexible and have a lot of variety of approach, because again, those needs are going to be different. So, you know, I think you have to kind of know that situation in advance. You know, I think with special needs, I mean, the thing is, like, students could have different reactions to things. Sometimes certain music or certain sounds could be maybe even be agitating to them. So you kind of have to maybe have more experience with that to know that a little bit better. But you know, those experiences can really teach us like how to be creative and how to explore new things. And oftentimes it's a necessity to be like explore new things in order to be successful in that area. So again, that's probably all I can really tell you about that question, because I feel like I don't have enough experience with it to give a better answer in this short amount of time. So sorry about that. Yeah, and that's quite an age range too that you're talking about that I see. So again, I imagine that there's going to be like a variety of approaches. Okay, we got the Vade Mecum taken care of. Thanks. Okay, just want to make sure I got all the questions. Some of the replies are hidden there. Okay. Any last minute questions or thoughts that anybody wants to ask about? Again, just making sure I got everything. Great. Well, I hope that you found this helpful today, just to kind of get in the right mindset for the summertime. It is such a wonderful time of like just in general, like rejuvenation and growth. I guess it depends on which part of the world you're in, right? Because some places summertime in North America is like winter in other places. But in general, whenever your summertime is, it doesn't really matter. You know, most of the time we look forward to that time of, you know, even in nature, you know, when everything turns green, the flowers bloom, we look that kind of magical regrowth process that happens every year. You know, it can happen with ourselves, it can happen in our music making and our flute playing. So I think it's a very useful time and a very exciting time. So, all right, well, thank you everyone for being here today. Once again, happy Mother's Day to moms out there, and I wish everyone a happy and beautiful summer in general, and I should be back next month. So take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.